All right, you found us. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, we got 3 questions and 3 answers for you. Without any further ado, let's start. What's the difference between a cast iron and a competition kettlebell?
The spelling.
Perfect. Okay.
So we got a couple. We get this question a good bit, and with everything, it's going to depend on what it is you're trying to do. But let's outline a few of the differences. If you're looking to buy one over the other, let's say you're getting a bigger weight to do two arm swings with, a lot of the competition bells don't have a big enough window for 2 hands. Mm-hmm. Okay, generally man hands don't work. Women hands do often, but when you look at the relative size window, and it really would have been helpful if we would have gotten bells of the same mass.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, but whatever, same difference. Here we go.
Actually not. That's why we're going to point that out. I'm glad you brought that up. So put your hands in it. Okay.
Oh, they don't even fit. It's like you can see Chevrolet Chevette.
Like he's got some goofy pinky spread going on, if that's a thing. Okay, now go ahead and use the other one. So nice and comfortable there. Mm-hmm. That's been. Never mind. So the window for your hands is a big deal. So if you're looking to get something you want a 2-hand swing, you're probably going to want to get the cast iron bell. Okay. Second thing to look at is the mass. The mass of the bell is identical. They're both 48 kilograms. Okay. But looking at the relative size difference is significant. So generally, if you're looking at a center of mass of an object, it's going to be in the center. The kettlebell is mostly a sphere, but we do have some extra stuff on top. So the percentage of the handle to the body, let's say these are just numbers I'm pulling right out of my ass, but let's say 95% of the mass is here, mm-hmm. Okay? This is 5% of the mass, and let's say this is 90% of the mass, and this is 10% of the mass, okay? So did I add up to 100?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll review the tape. If we're wrong, just add a 1 or 2 or somewhere.
So the idea is the center of mass, because there's more here, this is going to be a little bit higher. That's going to be a little bit more toward the center. You can look at the relative height difference here. So when you're holding this bell, this is going to actually work as kind of an axis point or a pivot point, because the kettlebell, when you hold it in your hands, naturally is going to want to spin. So the bell kind of has its own internal moment arm. If you look at the axis of rotation, and then the center of mass, which is where the line of force is going to be with gravity. So this is going to be, in a way, a harder bell to manipulate because of that. Okay. Another reason that might be a harder bell to manipulate is the physical dimensions. Okay. If you're looking to push through the center of mass here is going to be farther, even though it's going to be relative to this, it's going to be a little bit higher because more is in the handle. When you look at the center of a smaller ball versus a bigger ball, the center mass is going to be farther away from your body. Now, when you have so let's say you're pretending to press a kettlebell, okay? So when you add mass to mass, okay, he's going to have, just keep it in the rack, he's going to have the combined kettlebell and his center mass. So his new center of mass is going to be somewhere in between where the bell is and right around there. So it's going to be right in there. The more this mass is and the farther that mass is out, the more he's going to have to shift his body. So you probably don't want to go that way. Okay. When you add mass to mass, he's going to shift that way. Okay. If you don't want to fall over, what are you going to do? He's going to lean. Okay. The farther this big thing is out, the more he's going to need to lean to keep this center mass over that hip. Okay. So let's say for a press, that's going to be significant. So because we have this bigger thing, it's going to be harder for him to manipulate. He's going to have to do more leaning. Another difference is there's a concept called moment of inertia. And people usually will use the high dive to demonstrate that. So if you look at people diving, when they dive off, they tuck into a tight little ball, mm-hmm. and they start spinning. If you watch them right before they come out of the water, or go into the water rather, they spread out. That stops the spin and it helps them go into the water straight. the more an object is concentrated around its center mass, the easier it's going to be to rotate. The more spread out that that total mass is, it's going to rotate slower. So this bell is going to rotate easier because it's more compact than this bell because it's spread out. So those are some of the bigger differences. So quick recap. The window is a big deal.
Window of the handle. Got it.
The height from the center to the handle is going to be more. So that's going to have kind of an internal moment arm of the bell that will make it more difficult with the bigger bell. The mass, the center of mass is going to be slightly higher here because more mass is higher than here. This handle is kind of integrated into the body and this one sticks out. However, because the total sphere is so much bigger, it's going to be farther out, relatively speaking, if you were to just put a dot in space.
Right.
Okay. What was the other thing? Oh, so he's gonna have to shift more to get this bigger center of mass over his hip, or he may have to do a little tilt. Those are press things. You should have attended the press clinic.
Or it's not too late to still buy the.
And the rotation. The smaller, more compact is going to rotate a little bit easier. So for me, what I do is if I want a bell that's going to rotate easier, especially if it's heavy. Oh, and another thing is the handle size.
The width.
This is a lot easier for my tiny little hands to grip. Okay. Versus here, let me use mine. So if you can see here, I can get my pinky, or I can get my thumb and my middle finger there, and I can't get quite as far here. So this is a much harder bell for me to handle. So if I'm looking to do swings and snatches and one arm work, I prefer a cast iron, especially as I get, or not competition, especially as I get heavier. If I want to do pretty much anything else, I'm fine. Competition belts can sometimes be a little harder on your wrist
because they all sit in the same spot, being heavier.
So if you look, let's say a competition belt might sit here. There's not a lot of padding here because remember the distance between the handle and the center where that bell is going to sit, it's not quite as far. So it's going to be right here on this part that's not that meaty. But as you get to the cast iron bell, he's got a lot more padding there. It's going to be a lot more comfortable in some cases as you get heavier. So the question, what skill do you want? What skill do you want to train? So if you're looking to do 2-arm swings, get your cast iron. If you're looking to do snatches, swings, especially if you have smaller hands, competition is really awesome. I find I don't have a problem with pressing. I do a lot of pressing with my 36, which is a competition, but I got the 36 because I want to be able to do my ballistics with it.
Got it. Yeah, so I mean, if you got one, be happy. Okay? All right. Number 2. My off arms don't match.
Oh shit.
Look, they don't match. And by match, I mean match. My off arms don't match. So in my swing, it's doing something weird. My snatch is doing something weird. What do we talk about?
So first off, your off arm mechanics. So let's pretend you're swinging. Okay. So his off arm, if he's swinging with his right, his off arm is going to be his left. The off arm can do a few things. One, I want you to point your off arm up toward that corner. You see how that causes him to rotate? Now I want you to point toward snatches the bunny, okay? So you see how that squares up his torso? So one, we can watch that arm and we can see how much or how little this torso is gonna rotate. So we can see that. Now, the ideal plane of motion for your swings and your snatches to take place is gonna be in this sagittal plane here. So as he's coming forward, the ideal scenario is going to be this arm's going to come straight forward because the idea of summation of forces, all the forces he generates add together to propel the bell. So he's got all the power from his legs that's going up through his torso into his arm. This arm is going to add to that and make his skills a little bit stronger. If the arm is going, let's say, more that way, he's now going more in the transverse plane and he's doing that. Now, the first thing we need to think is, one, do the arms match? And I think this was what the question was, and what does it mean? Usually I will find if people have this pattern, if they're kind of going straight back and straight up,
Oh, straight up this time. Just use words, man. Okay. Just do straight, the right way for me.
This is generally, this shows me someone has pretty good control. This off arm is additive. It's adding to the force, okay?
It's giving you the extra boost.
Yes. Now another pattern I will see is as people go down here, as they're going into the backswing, I'll see that to clear the bell, okay? So this line changes, and as they come up, I will see that happen.
To try and bring it back across.
So we've got two opposing forces that are trying to keep the entire system. The system is the kettlebell and him, trying to keep everything in balance. So generally, if your off arms don't match, usually means that one side is better connected than the other. What that actually means, that's the whole,
You will do one on that later.
That's a whole book to be written, or several to read.
We won't do one of those later.
But the idea is that, what is your off arm doing? So it can either be additive or it can be balancing. Those are the two things that I think. So if it's balancing, then I know that something in this region here could be all the way down to the foot, who knows? But something's not keeping everything in line the same way.
Yeah.
That's generally what that means. And we can then use video to see what is that arm doing. And usually as the arm cleans up and it starts going straighter, the swing gets more powerful, the snatch gets more powerful, and we're making progress.
Got it. Cool. Number 3.
You did it right. That's good.
I did it right. Should I kettlebell barefoot?
I don't know.
Or should I wear like my Nike Shocks?
So,
By the way, who has Nike Shocks anymore?
I don't know.
Ah, interesting. I always wanted to feel what they felt like.
Well, maybe we can find somebody.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Size 12?
So this is an interesting thing. When you listen to a lot of the proponents of barefoot training, they make a lot of excellent points about the feet working naturally and the sensory input from the feet. And I totally think that's compelling. It makes a lot of sense. But I do think that we need to consider not just what would the ideal scenario be, but what are you ready to do? So a lot of people will read, an article, watch a video, be like, oh, I need to go barefoot. Barefoot's better. Barefoot may be better, but you may not be ready for barefoot. So you first need to consider, one, the shoes that you have. What are they doing for your body? A lot of, especially Nikes, they really will pitch you forward a little bit.
Because they're running and you want to go forward.
Or they're basketball shoes, whatever they happen to be. There's a little bit of wedge in them. They tend to pitch you forward. They make things like squatting. And moving a little easier for some people because for whatever reason, the common thing to see is people just not moving well in this plane. So sometimes that'll be an advantage that you're giving up. But again, maybe you're doing something that's a little more hinge based and you may not want that.
Right.
So one, what are your shoes doing for you? Are they controlling a motion that you can't otherwise control? If you have some sort of motion control shoe, even in or an orthotic, when I first learned about this stuff, I was like, oh, this stuff is bad. They're like casts for your feet, like all of the other, all the cliches that you learn. But then when you really start thinking about it, it's force, it's gravity, it's what is the shoe doing to your body? So if you lean forward, gravity is interacting with him differently. His muscles are activating differently. He's a different human in this position than he is in this position. So
I'm a robot.
So we have to consider what are your shoes doing with your interaction with gravity. Maybe you need some correction, and that's totally cool. I think a reasonable compromise would be, how far gone are your feet? Are you 55 years old and you just started taking off your shoes? Odds are your feet may not be able to get where you need to go right away. So either A, maybe stick to shoes, or B, start going around barefoot periodically. But, something to think about is if your goal is to bench press 315 pounds, you're not going to wake up one day like, let's try it. Okay. Probably a bad idea. So if your goal is to go barefoot, you may not want to just go all out. You want to have a little bit of a wearing in period. So, and sometimes, people going around barefoot in the house can be a decent start to see how that feels.
All right. And then you can kind of incorporate, maybe some things like the Chuck Taylors or the Vans or some flat-soled shoes and start to begin maybe doing some walks in your neighborhood, or to your local kettlebell club. Any of those things. All right, cool. All right, well, those are 3 questions. You got any more? Put them in the comments below. Email us, and thanks for watching. Stay strong.
You stay strong.
Okay.
Okay.